Hi, folks. I'm Steve Ryan, the general manager of the Wine Foundry and our brands, Anarchist Wine Co. and Foundry Wines, based in Napa Valley, California. Welcome to the Wine Foundry, also known as currently my dining room. We are a boutique-owned family, or boutique family-owned winery with our two brands and Foundry Wines. Just to kind of give you a little background between the two brands, Foundry Wines represents the best of Napa and Sonoma and Santa Barbara County from time to time in classical styles. Thank you, Stu. Even when blending, our winemaker Patrick will stay relatively within traditional blending guidelines as far as the varietals he'll use. Anarchist Wine Co. embraces the creative spirit, bringing thought-provoking blends, and is essentially Patrick's playground where he gets to play mad scientist. And to introduce those guys, Stuart Ake, on my screen, he's to my left, or my right, I guess. And he is our wine educator, wine guru, all-around great guy. And Patrick is the one that looks like a sports commentator or a helicopter pilot right now with his headset. Can't decide which one. He's our director of winemaking. Both. And responsible for everything you got in the bottle. So tonight we're going to be bringing you a bottle of our 2014 Conspiracy Theory from Anarchist Wine Co. and the 2015 Eidola from Foundry Wines. Excuse me. This week we're going to focus on the art of blending, as well as for next week when we get to the next two wines in this Romeo and Juliet 4-pack. The sort of subtitle for that is Uncommon Blends with Storybook Results. And we'll give you some background on that. We're going to have Patrick and Stu talk quite a bit about wine. We're going to talk a little bit about some industry bits. So as a reminder to everybody, be sure to open both bottles now, pour both glasses now, definitely kind of start working it through. Both wines are not yet nearly at their peak, especially the Eidola. So a little more aeration on that will do it well. If you don't have these wines with you or in front of you right now, that's okay. Pour anything from wine, beer, tequila. Have a good time. We're here to basically go through the art of blending. We're going to talk a little bit about naming of wines, because some people might think some of these names are a little wonky, or hopefully you think they're fun, but we'll get in the background of that. We give you a forum to ask us whatever you want to ask about the wines, the brand, winemaking. We've got our award-winning winemaker here at your disposal. Collectively, we all have, about 60 years experience in the alcohol industry and fermentation. So you can ask us a lot of things, and if we don't know the answer, we'll speak confidently enough to where you think we do. And we're just gonna have a bit of fun. Join us in the chats, answer questions or ask questions in the Q&A section, and we'll get started there. And let's see here. Why don't we go ahead and jump into some industry jargon. So with the naming of the wines, it's very difficult. We have a pretty great team that works very cohesively at the winery, and we all always are brainstorming different names, thinking they're really cool, and then we hand them off to Valerie, who's one of the founders and co-owners of the winery, and also our general counsel, and so she'll go and check it out on the USPTO website and see if they're trademarked or not, and probably 99.8% of the time they're totally trademarked. It's very difficult to find a name for a wine that is, or a wine brand that is not taken. So we're constantly running this list, and with the conspiracy theory, we'll start there. That one came up late one night. Valerie's husband, Philip, who is the other owner of the winery and one of our founding partners, obviously, he was up late one night, couldn't sleep, was watching some sort of janky conspiracy theory sort of documentary, if you can call it that, on TV, and kind of thought, wow, that's a really cool name for a wine. So it's kind of an example of how sometimes the name comes before the wine, and other times the name or the wine comes before the name. So conspiracy theory is a really fun way to do it. And thank you, Stu, that's good. Conspiracy theory was a lot of fun, to where he could hand it off to Patrick, and then Patrick could really have quite a field day on coming up with the blend. So We are going to have one other little bit of fun before I kind of pass it off and get a little further into the wine that I should tell you about, which is we're going to invite you to a little contest, and it's going to be taking a stab at writing tasting notes. So on that tech card that Stu just briefly showed up there, and I think, yeah, there you go. You'll see down on the second panel of it, there's a couple of sentences that we call tasting notes or a description. And exactly, good job, Stu. You're really good today. Look at that cloud. So you can see that we have a little bit of fun with it. Every wine's different. We try to give you an idea of what the wine tastes like when we're going into bottle or when we're about to release it. And we invite you to join a contest where you can try to draft your own tasting notes for these wines or for any other wine, really. And we're going to kind of go by 3 different categories. One would be, oh, thank you, Stu. Perfect. I needed that, actually, because I would have forgotten. So we're going to have our winemaking staff judge these next week, next Thursday. And the categories are, could be done on creativity. So, you know, just no rules abound. We have anarchy on there, but really it's just about fun or wit. And then others maybe most likely for us to plagiarize and use, and you save us all a little bit of work next time. So if you want to submit those, you can send any of those in before Wednesday, the 22nd, next week. And you can send them to taste@anarchistwineco.com. We'll put that in the chat as well, if Sharath could do that for me. And email those into us. And then our winemaking staff and cellar crew are going to go ahead and vote on those. And we will announce the winner next week on Friday evening. And the winner gets to receive a wine growler. So this might look like a water bottle. However, it holds exactly 750 milliliters. It'll keep the wine to temp. It's amazing. Keeps the bottle of rosé cold after a 5-hour hike. It also keeps the red nice and cool before if you're leaving it in the car or anything for a bit. And also nobody knows you're drinking out of it when you are. So getting into the wines. You guys ready?
Absolutely. And I just want to kind of chime in one little bit on the growler. I put some sushi in here in December and took it out for lunch today, and amazing. So held that fish has just been preserved very well for 4 straight months. Hey, everybody. What we want you to do is let's pour a little bit of conspiracy theory in the glass. Right now, I've just opened up the 2014. As you noticed, I actually was kind of taking a couple of sips. I couldn't wait beforehand. So we've got the conspiracy theory in the glass. Everybody, raise your glass, whether you're drinking conspiracy theory or whatever you are, wherever you are. We send you good health and cheers. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
That smells tasty. So I'm with Patrick Sabo, our director of winemaking, a longtime winemaking colleague of mine. Here on the conspiracy theory, we have, you know, when I first met Patrick a decade ago, he was a traditional winemaker. He wore a fleece vest. He drove a truck. But he also made wines that were vineyard designated wines, like Pinot Noir had to be Pinot. Cabernet had to be blended a certain way. He was a traditionalist. You look at what's going on with the conspiracy theory. This wine has 7 different varietals, 41% Syrah, 14% Grenache, 13% Cabernet Sauvignon, 11% Pinot, 8% Malbec, 7% Cab Franc, 6% Petite Syrah. Patrick, what happened? You've made.
I was drinking a lot that day, for sure.
You were definitely drinking. So do you do that?
Yeah.
So let's taste it. But while you're tasting, what are you trying to do with this wine, Patrick?
You know, I really wanted to do something you'd never. I wanted to put something in front of you you'd never had before, and I wanted you to not expect the result, and to get something that you would look at it on paper and people are like, what are you doing? That sounds a bit strange. And then you taste the wine, and I think it's a great wine. The wine we opened, Steve and I opened yesterday afternoon. And so has had 24. Both wines have had 24 hours, roughly now to open up for me, and so they're even better than they were yesterday. And the conspiracy theory is of 2014, so it's been in bottle now for almost 4 years, and so it's been a while. So that what happens, it continues to evolve, not just in the upstream of bottling, but downstream of bottling as well. And so you're getting different flavors and aromas that come out at different points in the wine's life, and depending on what your preferences are, you'll see different sides of the wine. And so why did I do it like this? And to your point, I definitely, we were talking about this earlier, and that it was true. I definitely was and I still am a purist for the most part. However, there are times when I think it's appropriate to do things non-traditionally as well. I think that there's no reason to be one or the other when you can be both of those things. So I think it's super fun to challenge myself, and I didn't expect a Grenache and 13% Cab with 11% Pinot. Doesn't seem a smart choice, until you've done it and tried it and go, oh wow. And so I do a number of different blends and try them out, and they're hugely different over the spectrum. And depending on your preferences, it can be better or less. And so sometimes we put white wines into the red wines. But now in this case, we had all reds. But there are other wines we'll taste for sure that will be, we tasted the Rage last week, right? And the Rage had 4 or 5% white wine into it. And so you can change it. And the question is, do you want to change? And so until you've tried things this way and that way, you don't know if you would prefer it that way. And so that was the best part of it, is turning off your bias and your prejudice going into it and just trying it. And so I did. I was surprised by the results. And so I kept trying it different ways. And as you see, there's 7 different grapes in there, and there's a lot of variables to move up and down. So you have to try it. This is one of the reasons how I justify my tasting frequency so much, is to see, because I had to try it. You see all these different numbers, and those weren't random numbers. I had to try it at 42% Syrah and at 9% this and 12% that, and so until hundreds of different blends till I get to the one that I thought really kind of spoke to what we were trying to do here. And so
when you're going through, Patrick, and doing the blends, you're tasting, can you kind of just walk us through, so everyone's at home right now, they have their glass of conspiracy theory. I hope you are on the chat function. 80% of your grade today is 80% of your grade is going to be typed participation. So if you could type in some of the things you're getting, but Patrick, you're swirling over at your table. Can you kind of walk us through in a couple of minutes, why do we do the swirl, and what are we doing when we're tasting, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the swirling, our wine has a lot of compounds in it that are oxygen, interact with oxygen quite a bit. And they evolve over a period of time due to their interaction with oxygen. And by swirling the glass, you are increasing the contact with oxygen. And the analogy I like to use here is kind of like the flowers that have not bloomed yet, and they are kind of bloomed. The oxygen is helping it to bloom. So the aromas and flavors, it seems like, Steve likes my analogies usually anyways. So I do think that it needs a certain amount, depends on how long the wine's been in bottle, of course. So it's been getting oxygen for the last 5 years through the cork, itself. And so very small amounts over periods of time. But it's slowly getting oxygen, and you're giving it lots of oxygen here, of course, by opening it up a day ahead of time or by swirling it around, of course, both of those things. So to me, yesterday when we tried the wines, we were getting certain aromas and flavors. Today I'm getting even more of those things. And so what I got yesterday, today I'm getting ×2 probably. So it has opened up even more.
But these things, like when you get the hints of lifted blood plum and, rich Corinthian leather, those compounds aren't in there, right? So, and that's one of the things what I find about wine culture that kind of drives me crazy is that, people are getting hints of this and whispers of that. They're not really in there.
No, but I do drive a Cordoba, and there are hints of Corinthian leather that might come through from my fleece. And so if you do get Ricardo Montalban would be very proud of you by mentioning the Corinthian leather.
I thought it was the Volare, but we'll go with the Cordoba.
The Cordoba is the Cordoba for sure.
Hey, so, and Patrick was kind of talking about his blends. What I'm going to do is just kind of pull up a couple of things. So first of all, I just want to show you what he is like, what the table looks like when we're doing blending sessions at the winery. He's got all of these pieces lined up here. I'm glad he's got his notebook. And Patrick, what are those different, so we refer to those little bottles as 375s. Patrick, when you have all those 375s lined up, what's going on?
I get thirsty, you know, and it's really, it's very important to be thirsty if you're a winemaker. It really does help to facilitate the winemaking and wine drinking. I'm sorry, I meant in this case. You know, I need to look at all the components. And so we through the Wine Foundry and our custom barrel, you know, wine program, we get access to fruit from all over the place, from Napa and Sonoma and Mendocino and Santa Barbara and up and down the coast and further inland into Clarksburg, which is in the Delta area outside of southwest of Sacramento. And so we get a range of grapes choices and things. So I have all these different spices to play with. And, you know, as a chef, you go into different restaurants, and the chefs that make the best dishes have access to the best ingredients. And so it's all about having all these different things available and then just trying them in different ways. You don't know if these two things would go together unless you've done the trial. And so I've done, again, this is part of my quality control initiative that I've implemented years ago. And to become a winemaker, you had to make sure you keep track of the quality at all times. So you have to taste them, taste, and you try it this way and that way, and then you learn what can work together. And so I honestly, the blend didn't seem like it still doesn't seem like I would have come up with that blend, because it's a pretty strange blend, but it is, I think it's fun. You've never had anything like that before. I'm certain of it. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't in the future, because it works, obviously. So, yes, sir.
Steve Ryan, what's up?
I was just Rebecca's throwing out plum and licorice on there on the chat, which is awesome. And Keith, I promise, we know you're having fun. One of our guests just sent me a text, I think making sure he's all covered, that we know he's playing with us a bit. That's the point. That's awesome. We love it. So we got a couple questions here that I'm gonna
please read them out.
Okay, so these are both geared towards Patrick. So Ilona's asking, is blending becoming more popular versus traditional approaches?
I think so. I think people are realizing that, you know, over here, fortunately, you know, a lot of places in Europe, tradition still dictates what you can do. In certain portions of France, in Burgundy and Bordeaux, you have to do these things. In certain portions, not just in France, but in other countries as well, in Spain or in Italy, if you're in certain places in Chianti, you can't do this other thing, right? And so you can't plant Cabernet and Italy, if you want to call it a Chianti. Now, if you're going to buck the trend and you want to do something different, you might call it a Super Tuscan. You might bring in Cabernet into it. We'll talk about that a little later, but that's certainly, but to that point, you can, you know, tradition, and the French particularly, has kind of set things off on a path of being, you needed to do the way your grandfather did it and your great-grandfather did and so forth. And in Burgundy, you only use Pinot Noir if it's a red, and it's Chardonnay if it's a white. And so you wouldn't put Beaujolais into your Pinot Noir or Cabernet into your Pinot Noir, of course, because that's not what your grandfather did. And so, but your grandfather might have been a little boring, perhaps, and maybe he needed to try things a little bit spicier. And it's fun to try it. You know, as I said, you have a certain prejudice or bias going into it, like I did, as Stu mentioned. Then I didn't think that I would never have thought formerly that blend sounded good or sounds good. But because I didn't know enough, I was too much in a box. To me, unfortunately, tradition informs you and guides you and gives you a lot of input into what other people have done. But unfortunately, it puts you in a box a little bit and restricts you and doesn't allow you to be free thinking. And so sometimes you shouldn't think about things because they don't work together. But sometimes maybe your father didn't understand that the Grenache and Cab and Syrah perhaps could go together, and Pinot. And so anyhow, I think that it's a matter of trying. I do think blending is becoming more, because people are becoming more informed that a lot of combinations work, and on whether it's art, and you're using mixed media and different things, or whether it's sound and you're using different, you're bringing in different types of music into these other genres, where all of a sudden you didn't realize that country would sound good in that rap song, perhaps, or whatever, but maybe it does. And Stu, do you have any versions of country rap?
I think you kind of gave those examples, what people commonly refer to as old world, although I think old world, new world has been kind of blurred in recent years, in the last 10 years. But I would say, look, we're in Napa Valley, and the wine police, like when you present these wines, these blends out, you see some sommeliers kind of start frothing at the mouth. I've seen some have some nervous twitches. And I guess I'm going to say, look, there's a beauty in tradition, but it's ultimately about flavor, the pursuit of flavor. And so I just, look, we get some resistance to these wines in our own backyard because, like, oh, you guys are those punk rockers in the south side of Napa who are kind of taking these unique approaches. But it's all about flavor. I'm going to bring up, we got a few more questions coming in, but I want to kind of show, like, when Patrick is kind of going through the process of actually tasting these things. So I'm going to kind of show this video here it's a slow motion video. He actually usually does it much more, a lot more quickly than that. So, and interestingly, Patrick doesn't even, doesn't drink coffee. So his ability to kind of execute it, it's such a high speed is amazing. Although I think we are going to be implementing some drug testing at the winery because you just are so fast. Anybody, I love, like, some of the chiming in that came in with the cigar box. Definitely the licorice and plum, and it's great. Steve, I think there's one more question that kind of came in, or I know there's two, but why don't we take one more and then we'll bring in another one shortly.
I think I can bang out both of these pretty quickly. So Sarah, over in Lafayette, I believe, where I grew up, go Dons. She asked, do you keep consistency over the years? And I think over the vintages. So the blends are going to be different. Yeah, but actually Patrick, he'll be a lot more interesting to answer this question.
Well, I mean, the idea behind it is the same, but and it certainly will be an original or a unique blend for sure. You would never have had it before, I'm certain of it, but the blending components would slightly change. And so the 13 was a little bit different than 14. The overall style or profile of it. So sometimes we might be a little bit more Petite Syrah based than Syrah. In this case, this Syrah is about 41% of the 14, but the 13 and the 16, I think is the next one coming out, is more Petite Syrah based. And so it's going to be just a touch, it's very similar in style, I guess, but the flavors aren't exactly the same. And do you want me to go ahead and answer the bricks question as well, Steve? Or?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can do it.
Yeah, there's another question about what is bricks, and as far as BRIX is the sugar scale that in the States and in a few other countries as well use. In Europe, they use a slightly different scale, but it's not exactly percent sugar, but it's close to the level of percent sugar. For example, those grapes were picked, typically red grapes are picked somewhere in the 23 to 27 or 28 bricks or so. So the sugar accumulates to about 24 or so bricks, and then you lose water. And so the difference between a grape and a raisin is, of course, the amount of water that the grape has in it. And as a raisin has very little to no water, and a grape, a hydrated grape is much lower in concentration, but it's not because the raisins have higher sugars, they just have less water. And so we typically wait to a certain point. The ripeness is usually 23, 24 to 27, depends on the varietal and the winemaker and the style of the wine. But that's what it is. It goes down to, by the way, the Brick scale doesn't go down to 0. It goes down to about minus 2.0. 1.6 to 2.0 is considered quote unquote dry, and meaning that there's little to no sugar left in the fermentation. So it goes from 25 or so down to minus 2 or so to get to be close to 0-ish percent sugar.
Hey, I just want to kind of remind everyone about our contest. So while you're tasting your conspiracy theory, I hope you have also, while you're keeping an eye on our beautiful faces, you are typing in your notes for the conspiracy theory, and you're going to send them because you have the opportunity to win the amazing growler with my sushi in it. Any other things, Steve, that you want to chime in here with the conspiracy theory, or Patrick yourself?
Yes.
No,
go ahead, Steve.
No, nothing for me.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to, back to some flavors and aromas. The flavors and aromas, just a quick note on that. Different people have different sensitivities and preferences for certain flavors and aromas. And the science, as I mentioned, of flavor aromas is quite complex and evolving over time. And so the wine doesn't start off at a low level. The aromas don't stay constant. So they evolve over. So you might get more plum early on and more licorice later, or more of this early. And of course, whether you like plums or licorice or toasted sassafras, you might want to have, drink it earlier or later. So it's not something I can control. The wine has been in bottle now for, as I said, 4 or 5 years. And so the aromas have changed over that time frame. And we definitely, it is fun to watch it, but it's not something I'm able to say, oh, I want more of this plum. There's so many different, as I said, there's over 1,000 compounds in wine. And so you're saying, and a lot of these things, unfortunately, is because it's a busy radar on your nose aroma radar, that you are smelling plums overlap with, with cola and cherries and sweet herbs and other things that are layered in there. They're not, it's like you could easily pinpoint necessarily plums or licorice because they're all together. It's not something, you have barrel components like chocolate and vanilla and butterscotch and caramel, and then you have spice, and then you have fruit and floral aromas and other things that have happened because of the fermentation. So it's fairly complex, and it's hard to say it's only these things because there's a lot of things, and depends on what your thresholds are and sensitivities are to those things. So
it sounds like a sensory analysis seminar is going to be kind of brought in. Somebody brought in that cigar box, and then I really can't get that kind of like a sweet spice character out of my nose on top of the fruit. It's kind of like this sweet little pie spice. It's a really nice, enticing aroma. I always, people kind of knock me when I say, oh, the wine's a drinker. This is kind of that wine that just kind of, you open the bottle and then wait, well, where did it go? Not me personally, but I know other people.
That's what happened to me. Unfortunately, that happened to me. So I'm going to have some more of that.
I think that is a conspiracy theory. And speaking of conspiracy theories, I think it's time for our little poll of the night. So, yes.
Need a drum roll?
Yes, we definitely need a drum roll.
I like that.
Whoops. So here we are. We're going to launch the poll here. Here is our poll for this evening. So on the lines of conspiracy theories, which conspiracy theory makes the best family vacation? You're going to take the flat earther cruise to the edge with a cast of Gilligan's Island.
Zoo.
So a vegetarian barbecue with Bigfoot and Dana Scully. Stargaze at the astral projection, or stargaze for the astral projections of Elvis in Roswell, New Mexico. Play Operation with Fox Mulder at Area 51. Scuba Dive with Steve Zissou and Jacques Cousteau, both wearing nice hats for the Loch Ness imposter. Fly to the Moon with Major Tom, David Bowie as a passenger, and then just take a nap on the grassy knoll. Or actually, we changed the article to a grassy knoll. So answers are coming in. I'm from Chicago originally, so we encourage you to vote early and often to, speaking of conspiracy theories, we will play with that one shortly. And then while that poll is still going on, we'll share the results in just a little bit. That was the conspiracy theory. And now we're going to be shifting gears. So conspiracy theory is part of our Anarchist brand, which is like Steve outlined before, crazy approaches, unique approaches, kind of creating new traditions for wine. And now we're going to kind of take a little step into a little nod to Italy with our next wine, the Eidola. Steve?
Thank you. This is fun. I'm really loving some of these chats. It's awesome. I like the spirit of this. And I can't believe that nobody wants to go to Area 51 and play Operation with Fox Mulder.
Or Fox Mulder, yeah.
Number one.
Yeah, you took out my spleen or whatever it is.
The whole thing seems a little sketch and dangerous for me, but okay. So the Eidola, which is this one, except maybe it's a little more full for you. I poured a pretty hearty glass. The Eidola for us came through. It's a Super Tuscan. Because we're not in Italy, we can't call it a Super Tuscan. So we call it a Super Tuscan inspired blend. And in summer of 2013, I went with my family to Tuscany and really just fell in love with the people and the wines, and especially the Super Tuscan style and the blend of a Bordeaux varietal with Sangiovese. And so that's really the crux of it. And Patrick can speak more about this when we get into the wine. But the people there are incredible. The wines were fantastic. Even the wines that weren't that good were so much better because the people and the sense of place and everything was so great. And so I came back and I was really all over Patrick about, like, we got to blend a Super Tuscan, to make a Super Tuscan, it'll be fun. And he was looking around for some Sangiovese, and we couldn't really find any that was really up to snuff. It took another year and a half until basically 2015, just before harvest, when we found some really great Sangio, that he felt that we could go ahead and do it, and it would actually impart what he was looking for the Sangio to get in there. So so we had that, and getting into this one was the wine came before the name. So many of you may not know, or at least I didn't originally, so many of you may know, actually I should say, what Eidola means. It's the plural form of Eidolon, which is also a poem by Walt Whitman. But and Eidolon is an idealized person or thing, and so this is something that also Philip and Val came up with. Philip was thumbing through the dictionary and he was looking for other words. I don't know why he wasn't thumbing through a thesaurus, actually, because he was looking for other words that sort of meant, a specter or, a phantom type of kind of ghost sort of thing. And then he stumbled upon Eidolon and Eidola. And our idea in pursuing this name was that our wine is a really great spirit image of the land and the grapes that Patrick makes this wine with, and really thought it was perfect for this, and also kind of spoke to the spirit of the people from my experience in Tuscany. And it was just a magnificently reminiscent of the properties where we source the fruit. So that's why we put this on the bottle. And there's a couple different areas, growing regions that we source this fruit from. There's all the Cab is from Napa Valley. The Cabernet Franc is from Napa Valley as well. But you'll notice on the back of the bottle, it's 22% Sangiovese, and that Sangiovese is from Dry Creek Valley in Sonoma County. I think Stu's going to be able to show us kind of where that area is. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so Dry Creek is just, if you go to Sonoma County, there's a town called Healdsburg. And Dry Creek kind of, yes, Healdsburg's part of it, but it's really west of Healdsburg. Maybe it's easier to see when it's on the map. You would had Healdsburg would be over here. You would head down Dry Creek Road. Here's something called the General Store. Very important to stop for a beer. And then our vineyard, which is called Dry Creek Bench, an organic vineyard with also biodynamic farming, which we can kind of chat about, was sourced from over here. So on the on what's called Dry Creek Road.
Yeah, so thank you, Stu. So the blend on it's 70% Cabernet Sauvignon, 22% Sangiovese, 5% Cabernet Franc, and 3% Petite Syrah, and Napa and Dry Creek Valleys predominantly. So I'm going to kick it back to Stu and Patrick to kind of talk through the style of this. And,
yeah. So
and make sure you guys are really getting in your glass here too.
I unfortunately have, or fortunately have, been getting in my glass. So Patrick, when we were going to put this wine together originally, I thought it was kind of funny where we talk about tradition again. And for those who don't know, there's kind of a Hatfields and McCoy mentality between, it's playful, between Sonoma County and Napa County, kind of trading barbs. Sonoma folk, like Patrick, think Napa folk tend to be maybe a little more uppity and maybe a little too uptight. And then in Napa, they say slow Noma. It's a little bit casual, but here we kind of cross the bridge, a little bit of country, a little bit of rock and roll. So we went to Dry Creek, and then Patrick, we also stepped over to the Napa side for the Cab Sauv.
Yep, and Sonoma, of course, they say they make wine over in Sonoma, and Napa makes auto parts. That's how they say about Napa as well, slow Noma. But I work in Napa, of course, so I don't say that about them. No, this is I think this is and again, this really particularly benefits from more oxygen. So opening it the day ahead of time, like I did, is fantastic. It was very good yesterday with Steve and I. I actually had a glass last night also, and it was a little better than it was at 4 o'clock or so when Steve and I tasted it, but it was pretty close. It's only been in bottle for a couple of years, and it still has a reasonable amount of tannins in it. It's like, again, back to my flower analogy, it is not at all bloomed. Today, it's much, much, much more open than it was yesterday. I gave Steve flowers yesterday, and they were just all buds, and so he didn't really think it was very pretty. But today, he would have been very overwhelmed by the beauty, because it's fantastic today. You know, I really, my wife, after our second child, she, for whatever reason, red wine stopped liking her. She loves red wines. They just don't prefer her. And so she drinks white wines only. So my red wines collection has expanded nicely. And I only go through half the speed than we did before. And so I am able to try that wine, all the wines on day 2 or day 3. And there's usually, in the young wines, are so much better on day 2 or day 3 than they are on day 1. It's mostly due to the amount of oxygen that it's had, and it hasn't had previous to that point. So upstream of this point, it hasn't had. I try to be as careful as I can early on to try to maintain longevity. Of course, if you're trying to drink it faster, you don't want it to be, you want it to be more ready to go. So sometimes I'll open up, if I know that I was having a special dinner or an event or something, I really want a bottle that I wanted to enjoy on Friday night. It might be better to open it up on Thursday night and to just close it back down again and put it on the counter. And then Friday night, it's going to be even better than it was the night before. And so every night, of course, during these times is might as well be Friday or Saturday night, and because it's a Wild West, I think, in drinking games during quarantine time frame. So
My bad.
Back to the, yeah, that's okay. Back to this point, you know, the wine, you know, Napa is the best place in the world, in my opinion, to grow Cabernet Sauvignon. And most vintages, under most conditions, Napa is the best place to grow. Sangiovese, of course, Italy certainly thinks that they are, but there are some other places as well. And it turns out Dry Creek is for Zinfandel and Sangio, is a great place to grow those varietals. And so the Sangiovese brings earthiness and a spice and a kind of a redder fruit profile that the Cabernet does not have. The Cab brings lush, dark fruit with the oak, spice and the tannins that Sangiovese can never have on its own. Cabernet Franc has a delicacy that neither grape, maybe Sangiovese, but neither Cab nor Sangio are able to achieve. And Petite Syrah has a spice and lushness that none of those grapes have. So by putting all those together at different levels, you can get a wine that, and particularly, as I said, one day open. And in the future, this wine you will need less and less time to open up to that point. But that's why Steve and Stu kept mentioning it multiple times, like make sure to open the bottle, mostly because you needed more oxygen. You're trying to fast forward on the wine to get it to be at its best point. And that's very subjective. But to me, it's twice as good, at least, as it was today. And so, go ahead.
Sorry, one of our people on here chimed in, asked the question about decanting, and the answer is yes. You don't need a fancy decanter, though. I mean, you can pour the wine in anything. As Patrick's saying, it's just about oxygen, and the more that the wine is exposed to oxygen, the more aromatics and flavor, and the more it's going to kind of hit your palate. Patrick, obviously it's subjective and it changes, but decanting.
It is. So it really depends on what a decanter does or what a pitcher does, or even by taking the cork out, pouring a little bit out, putting the cork back in, and shaking up the bottle does also, is that it aerates the wine. And so the reason why you'd pour in a decanter is because you're trying to fast forward, essentially. I like to call it fast forward. You're trying to speed up the process that you would normally be. So you're giving it more surface area around the decanter. You're giving it more oxygen interaction against the surface of wine. So you're trying to speed up the points because you're trying to enjoy it faster. So a decanter for a wine, for a group, or for if you're going to either wait on the wine or you're going to do it for a group. If you're just drinking the two of you or a foursome, really, even if you don't really, depends on how many people are drinking the bottle, how fast you need it to open up. And so if you're in a hurry, then a decanter works better than just opening the bottle. Just like that's the reason why you swirl it in your glass, is because you're decanting it. You're trying to, again, fast forward to make it as enjoyable as possible. And to me, this wine needs at least a day open to be at its peak. So one of the questions was, what's the optimal time to sit this wine down? I'd say that the optimal time is going to be at least a couple more years probably. And so before it really reaches peak, that doesn't mean you can't drink it on the way up, because now you just wait longer for it to kind of get to its sweet spot. And it's very subjective. And it's not a right. The answer for me, it may or may not be exactly the right answer for you, because I like it a certain way, and you might like it slightly different. Older wines need less oxygen because they've already had plenty of, there was another question, older or newer wines. Newer wines need way more typically, but it really depends on how much oxygen. So it's hard to stereotype a question, and the winemaking, when I do it, I'm being usually, for the most part, with exception of a few times, during Cabernet Sauvignon actually benefits from some amount of oxygen a few times throughout. It's called racking, when you take the wine from one vessel and stick it into another vessel and put it into a tank and then back into the same barrel again, or you change from barrel to this barrel, from that barrel to a newer barrel to an older barrel, or vice versa, or whatever you're doing. But in that case, I might actually use a pump to increase the oxygen levels just slightly, because it definitely benefits it. But some wines, like Pinot Noir or other varietals, white wines for sure, I'm trying to get as little to no oxygen as possible to maximize the shelf life of the wine, so to not bloom those flowers before the person's received them. And so that's mostly to do with when you're going to drink the wine. If I'm trying to drink the wine 4 years from now, then I don't want it to be ready now. I want it to be ready in 4 years. So it needs to be buds and not flowers now if I'm going to be drinking it in 4 years or 2 years, or whenever I'm downstream from here. And so it's not easy to stereotype, because everyone's drinking it at different, I don't have a lot of patience myself. I want to drink the wines because I am thirsty, as I mentioned. And so I definitely want to, but it's very subjective. If you have a lot of wine that's already aged, then you don't need this wine to be ready to go. It's great that it's not ready yet, because you're going to drink it in a year from now, or 2 or 3, because you're already drinking the stuff that's ready to go further, that's already been bottled back, or that had more oxygen, or was done in a style that wasn't And so it really depends on the foundry wines. And generally, I'm trying to make it go for a long time because people, they're, for whatever reason, well, for multiple reasons, when you spend more money on a wine, generally they expect it to last longer because they think that is more expensive should last longer. And so, and this wine has only been in bottle for a couple of years, so it's easily 2 to 4 or 5 years down the road before it reaches its max. Whereas the conspiracy theory has already been in bottle for 4 years, I think, at this point, and so, or close to it. And so we're maybe a year or so away from its peak. And so we're near the it still was better today. Again, back to my point, I opened this bottle yesterday, and it was very good yesterday. It's way better today. It's way better, and it's because of the amount of oxygen it needed. And so they both were, I think, yummy, but it just tells you that you waiting or opening it up early or even the day before sometimes. I said, I just close it right back again, open it up, maybe have a little bit, and then close it, and then tomorrow I'm just waiting for it to, it's kind of like stewing. No offense to.
Thank you. Man.
And it is getting better. Well, maybe it is. That wasn't offensive if you're getting better and you're stewing.
So one of the things when we talk about the ageability of it, I mean, the big thing that really helps this wine in terms of ageability is Cabernet Sauvignon. And we source from a few different vineyards. So here's Napa Valley. I'll back out a little bit for those. So here's the city of San Francisco down here, and then Napa just to the north. And for the Cab Sauv portion of this, we source from 3 different areas within Napa Valley. So one of the vineyards we sourced from was called St. Stephen's Vineyard, inspired by Steve Ryan, our general manager, and by a song as well. And St. Stephen's, and St. Stephen's comes from this area right over here called Coombsville, South Napa. You can see how close we are to the bay. And so because of the cool temperatures from the bay, we get a nice long growing season. And if you harvest on the early side, you get nice herbaceous notes. But if you let the grapes sit for a long time, you get beautiful, rich, opulent fruit. And then we also sourced from this side of the valley over here. There's an area over here which is called Mount Veeder. And so we kind of climbed up into the mountains over here, really low by the valley floor, and then high altitude. And then finally, for the third component of Cab Sauv, we source from right here in the heart of the lowlands here in Rutherford to just get different layers of Cab Sauv. One thing I want to point out, Patrick, is that although this wine is a 2015, you put some 2016 in this wine. And I kind of whispered there for just a second, because in case any police officers were, I mean, is that legal to put some 2016 into a 2015?
That's Anarchist. That is true anarchy there. To even consider that. Yeah. You know, we are allowed to actually add, for it to be a vintage or a vineyard, you're allowed to add, in the United States, you're allowed 5% out of vintage or out of vineyard. In this case, it's not a vineyard designate because I'm looking to expand as multiple Cabernet vineyards, as you mentioned, up and down the valley, Coombsville, Rutherford, Mount Veeder. So you really a full Napa expand there. Then you have Dry Creek Valley, and Stagecoach is east side of Napa as well for the Cab Franc. So you really have I think the best kind of like an all-star show there of fruit. And as I mentioned, this wine, man, Steve, we liked it yesterday. We both, and I did have a glass last night, and I thought it was very good. Today, it's excellent. It really is. It's so much better. And you were mentioning it, how it really needs a second day. And you were just talking about that yesterday, and it's true. It's very good.
For our wine geeks out there, why incorporate the next vintage? Why bring in a new vintage into the 15th?
Yeah, good question. I didn't actually, you asked a question, I kind of ducked it. It was, the reason is it brings in just a little bit more juiciness and youthfulness to the wine. So it picks up the and Petite Syrah and younger Petite Syrah brings this kind of it's lush and rich, and it adds enough texture and weight to kind of, because I'm balancing out the cab, because some things work for you for this, and some things work for you. Like as I mentioned, the cab brings this qualities, the Sangio brings these qualities, but sometimes they kind of pull. Like you might like aspects of the Sangiovese, but it restrains the wine. So you might need to build back some of that by adding some Petite Syrah or something else that fills the palate out. And so it's kind of, I'm trying to get a certain profile. And then, of course, I can do anything we want. In the new world, we can literally do, we're wide open. And so I wanted Petite Syrah, a little secret sauce maybe. I put that in everything perhaps, even the Chardonnays. I put Petite Syrah and Sauvignon Blancs, or maybe a very, very small.
I think you were having too many glasses of Eidola last night.
It could be, perhaps.
So, and if you could, again, for the contest, if you could share your insights and your ideas in terms of tasting notes. You've seen that we have kind of fun with our tasting notes. We encourage you to do so as well. I'm going to loop back to the conspiracy theory and share the results with our audience here. So we had 18% went for Gilligan's Island. We had 9% go for the barbecue with Mulder and Scully, or Sculder and Mully, as I used to say. 9% went with the stargazing for Elvis. Nobody went for Operation with Fox Mulder. Makes me very sad. 27% went for scuba diving with The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou and Jacques Cousteau. Again, flying me to the moon with David Bowie. And some people just preferred just a nice nap in front of the book depository on the grassy knoll. Hey, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Remember, again, your tasting note submissions, because this growler, not this one, but a growler will be yours, and it will be announced next week. Same bat channel. Yes, I saw the same bat time. Saw the chat come through earlier talking about bats. Submit your answers to taste@anarchistwineco.com, taste@anarchistwineco.com by Wednesday, because we do need time to read. I hope you are thinking, I hope you are drinking, and then you can do that. Next week, want to let you know, we're going to be doing part 2 of our Romeo and Juliet tasting series with the Anarchist, which is the namesake of our brand, and then the Crucible from our Foundry lineup. So that is definitely going to be a storybook ending. And if you are on the East Coast, please place your orders for those wines shortly so that they have enough time to get there. 2-packs are available, and for those wines are available on anarchistwineco.com. The whole 4-pack is there. We're recording this. We often know that people like to listen to these again because we also have some subliminal messages put in, some backwards soundtracks kind of putting in there. So you definitely want to listen again. We'll also send a note in the next day or so with a link to the recording. Now, next Wednesday, if you are familiar with our Wine Foundry Wednesday, we are going to be geeking out with Randy Luganbill, who is in charge of the vineyard, Rogers Creek Vineyard in the Petaluma Gap of Sonoma County. The Petaluma Gap is what kind of within the Sonoma Coast AVA. If you are a fan of Chardonnay or Pinot Noir, that is going to be amazing. We're going to be hearing it straight from the horse's mouth. Randy is not a horse, but he does an amazing imitation of one. So that'll be Wednesday night. Thursday night, ladies and gentlemen.
Is that Mr. Ed impression, or is it Mr. Ed, or who?
Wilbur. So and then
Where Where do they sign up for the Wine Foundry Wednesdays?
So we have in the follow-up note that will come out, there's an Eventbrite link. You can sign up right there. Even if you don't have enough time to read the book by next Wednesday, you can still join us. Our next book will be Cork Dork, kind of a classic of wine lit of the last 15 years. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that. And then next Friday, the storybook thing. But we really hope we can join us for next Thursday's book group, which is going to be Amber Revolution. It's all about orange wine. So white wines that have been fermented on the skins to give incredible complexity. And everyone says, oh, it's a new category. It's a new category. No, it's actually one of the oldest categories. What's old is new. Next Thursday night, same bat channel, same bat time. If you want to, feel free to drop me a line anytime. Stuart at the Wine Foundry. If you want to ask any more questions of us, we're going to stay on. But for those who are signing off on the East Coast and the West Coast, thank you so much. Cheers. Steve, before we do it, cheers.
Yeah, before we can do a group cheers in a sec, I just also wanted to say, if anybody, hopefully you all like the wines and Patrick's helicopter impersonation. You can also check out our wine,
Roger,
wineco.com, and we have a 6-bottle and 12-bottle shipment. We're about to do our spring shipment in about a week and a half or so, 2 weeks from now. And if you have any questions, shoot a note to taste@anarchistwineco.com. And cheers. Thank you very much.
Cheers, everybody. Sending love.
Stay on and answer questions.
Salud.
And thank you.